industrial policy, and global competition. Nowhere is this clearer than in artificial intelligence. Trump has framed AI as a strategic weapon in what he calls a global technology race. His policy advisors have emphasized rapid innovation over strict regulation, warning that heavy oversight could allow China or other rivals to gain the upper hand. This approach aligns closely with the preferences of major tech companies, which have repeatedly argued that AI rules should be light touch and industry-led. Under Trump, federal agencies were encouraged to accelerate AI adoption across government, from defense systems to border security tools. Privacy concerns and ethical safeguards were often treated as secondary. For big tech, this meant lucrative government contracts and fewer regulatory barriers to deploying power. Industry leaders argue that speed is essential. Critics, however, warn that such policies risk entrenching corporate dominance while leaving the public exposed to biased algorithms, surveillance overreach, and job displacement. The industry is another clear winner. Trump has long viewed computer chips as a matter of national security. During his presidency, he pushed aggressively to reduce U.S. dependence on Asian manufacturing, especially on Taiwan and South Korea. His administration pressured companies to move to the United States, while restricting Chinese firms' access to advanced chip technology. Benefited major U.S. chip makers and equipment suppliers, who gained both government support and protection from foreign competition. Tariffs and export controls reshaped global supply chains, often in ways that favored established American firms with the resources to adapt. Trump has promised to double down on this strategy if re-elected. He has criticized existing industrial policies as too slow and has floated the idea of using executive power to fast-track domestic chip production. For big tech firms reliant on advanced semiconductors from cloud computing giants, that means a more secure, stronger government backing. Trade policy more broadly has also worked in big tech's favor. While Trump's trade wars disrupted many industries, technology giants were often able to navigate tariffs more easily than smaller competitors. Some secured exemptions, while others shifted supply chains without significant losses. While Trump's award, China aligned with Silicon Valley as growing concerns about intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. By framing tech dominance as a patriotic goal, Trump effectively tied corporate success to national interest. This allowed big tech to argue that its growth was essential, but for America, labor and tell us. Despite populist messaging, Trump's administration largely avoided aggressive antitrust action against major technology firms. High-profile investigations stalled, and proposed breakups never materialized. Enforcement agencies were staffed with officials skeptical of broad regulatory intervention. This hands-off approach benefited companies facing mounting scrutiny over market dominance, data control, and acquisitions of smaller rivals. Many of those same companies are now watching closely to see what term would continue this trend. Still, the relationship is not without tension. Trump has repeatedly threatened to repeal legal protections for social media companies and has attacked individual executives by name. His criticism resonates with voters who distrust big tech's power. But policy analysts note that these confrontations have rarely translated into sustained regulatory action. Instead, the broader pattern suggests a transactional relationship, public criticism paired with private alignment on core economic and strategic goals. For big tech, the stakes are enormous. AI development, chip manufacturing, cloud infrastructure, and defense-related technology are all poised for explosive growth over the next decade. Federal policy will play a decisive role in shaping who leads and who profits. Supporters of Trump's approach argue that prioritizing innovation and national competitiveness is essential in an increasingly fragmented world. They say regulation can come later, once American leadership is secured. Critics counter that this strategy risks concentrating power in the hands of a few corporations while sidelining concerns about privacy, labor rights, and democratic accountability. As the 2024 election approaches, one thing is clear. Despite the public sparring, big tech and Trump share many overlapping interests. From artificial intelligence to computer chips, the policies being discussed in Washington suggest that, once again, the technology industry may find itself getting exactly what it wants. And the consequences of that alignment will shape not just the economy, but the future of technology itself.
The Federal Reserve expects gross domestic product to grow quickly in 2026, faster than what they thought just months ago.
Some of that may be AI. It just also, I think, productivity has just been almost structurally higher for several years now.
We have had a boost in productivity growth. And he was pointing out that that boost in productivity had occurred even before AI was a big thing on the scene.
Economists believe AI could dramatically change how Americans work.
In terms of policymakers' concerns, employment loss is huge, but productivity gains equivalently huge.
So the chairman is taking that into account and said, hey, we've had higher productivity. Now I'm looking at the idea that there's massive investment into AI, and I can probably expect some productivity or gains in efficiency from that. So that's, I think, part of what the Fed is thinking about right now.
Here's how AI is changing the Fed's economic outlook. New technologies tend to lead to employment losses, particularly during the early years of adoption. But eventually, they boost productivity.
In the very long run, suppose AI capacity can no longer expand, employment loss will be like 23%. But labor productivity can increase by 3 to 4 times. This is because AI can learn. And the human being can also try to utilize AI more effectively and train AI more effectively to suit each person. And thus productivity gain is actually huge.
Economists illustrate this with a J-curve.
When you introduce a new technology, in general, you have a decline in efficiency and even in job growth. And then the data starts to show an improvement in both productivity and in job growth. And I think the Fed is seeing, at least initially, that AI will probably be flat when it comes to job growth, as are most technological introductions, that you don't get a whole lot of jobs when people start to incorporate and see places where that productivity has led to more profitability. That's when it leads to more job growth.
Today's labor market is growing at a relatively slow pace.
Is that job growth has definitely taken a step down, and that's best throughout the year. And part of that reflects layoffs of federal workers, but also we're seeing declines in the private sector as well. So it's not just federal government layoffs, but there's definitely been a step down in job growth this year, and it accelerated since the reciprocal tariffs were put in place in April.
The unemployment rate ticked up to 4.6% in November. The Fed's top economists say they can't tell how many jobs the U.S. needs to create to keep that rate from rising.
As we look at an environment that's been characterized, I would say, as this low hiring,
Right.
it's worth remembering that's not what the business cycle looks like. You have low hiring, high layoffs, or you have low layoffs, high hiring. For both to be low at the same time, to me, that says more like uncertainty than it does slowdown.
The Fed's tools are not designed to address technological advancements like artificial intelligence.
What the Fed is looking for is what is the sort of cyclic trend versus the secular trend. What are things that it can do something about?
Generative tools like Anthropic's Claude, Alphabet's Gemini, or OpenAI's ChatGPT improve over time as more people use them to augment their work. As businesses adapt, economists say there's a chance that workers become significantly more productive, but lose leverage when it comes to wage negotiations.
Those people who can actually make AI better, who can also make themselves better, will never be replaced. But the kind of middle type people may be capped. That will turn out to be a concern for sure, because we will end up with either lower employment or lower wage.
This moment has some parallels to the past. Investors have poured money into AI infrastructure, pushing price-to-earnings ratios for tech stocks up sharply, much like the late 1990s.
How do we know when irrational exuberance has unduly escalated asset values? And how do we factor that assessment into monetary policy?
Alan Greenspan saw the investment in technologies in the mid-90s, and he decided that it was accelerating growth because it was an investment in technology that he believed was going to create productivity. And what he did in the mid-90s was decide not to raise interest rates in the face of that acceleration in growth and elevated inflation. And that was a very, very good call. It was a good call for a lot of years.
The Greenspan Fed did lower interest rates amid a brief recession sparked by the burst of the dot-com bubble. Today, the federal funds rate is expected to hover in neutral territory. That means it's neither speeding up growth or slowing it down.
Greenspan came along with a theory that I think most central bankers have still adopted, which is this. The Fed should not pop bubbles. The Fed should be prepared to address their implications for the broader economy and the banking system after they pop.
AI's problem is the potential of driving down wage, the potential of driving down employment. Lower interest rate may not fix those problems.
I tend to think that AI will not behave like a normal technology in that it will kill some jobs and create other jobs and sometimes many more jobs. But I still think that AI is not the disaster for the labor market that many people are afraid of.
From AI to chips, big tech is getting what it wants from Trump in Washington. A familiar alliance is quietly taking shape once again. As Donald Trump prepares for a possible return to the White House, America's largest technology companies are already positioning themselves to benefit. From artificial intelligence to semiconductor manufacturing, big tech appears to be getting much of what it wants from Trump-era policy priorities and potentially from a second Trump administration. During his first term, Trump often criticized Silicon Valley, accusing major platforms of political bias and threatening regulation. But behind the rhetoric, many of his administration's actions ultimately favored large technology firms, especially in areas tied to national security, industrial policy,
technology in that it will kill some jobs and create other jobs and sometimes many more jobs. But I still think that AI is not the disaster for the labor market that many people
Trump
are afraid of.
has framed AI as a strategic weapon in what he calls a global technology race. His policy advisors have emphasized rapid innovation over
From
strict
AI to
regulation.
chips.
Big tech is getting what it wants from Trump in Washington. A familiar alliance is quietly taking shape once again. As Donald Trump prepares for a possible return to the White House, America's largest technology companies are already positioning themselves to benefit. From artificial intelligence to semiconductor manufacturing,
argued that
big
AI
tech appears to be getting much of
rules
what
should
it
be
wants
light,
from Trump-era
touch,
policy
and industry-led.
priorities, and potentially from a second
Under
Trump
Trump,
administration.
federal agencies were
During his
encouraged
first
to
term,
accelerate
Trump often
AI
criticized
adoption,
Silicon Valley,
of
accusing major
cross-government,
platforms of political
from
bias
defense
and threatening
systems
regulation. But behind the rhetoric, many
borders
of his administration's
security
actions
tools.
ultimately favored large
Practical
technology
concerns and
ethical safeguards were often
especially in
treated as
areas
secondary.
tied to
For big
national
tech,
security.
this meant lucrative
industrial
government
policy
contracts
in that
and
it will
fewer
kill some
regulatory
jobs,
barriers
create
to
other
deploying
jobs,
powerful
sometimes
new
many
technology.
more
Industry
jobs.
leaders
But I
are
still
essential.
think that AI is
Connect
not the
this
disaster
further
for the
than
labor
an
market
artificial
that many
intelligence.
people are
Trump
afraid of.
has framed such AI policy as a strategic weapon, entrenching what he calls global while leaving the public exposed to biased algorithms. Policy advisors have emphasized overreach and job displacement over
From
industry
AI
and
to
regulation.
chips.
Trump big tech is getting
As
what
a
it
matter
wants
of warning
from
that
Trump in
heavy
Washington. A familiar alliance is quietly taking shape
the
once again.
right
He pushed
to gain
as
the
Donald
upper
Trump
hand
prepares
to
for a
reduce
possible
dependence
return
on
to the
Asian
White House.
manufacturing.
America's
Especially
largest
on
technology
Taiwan
companies
and
are already
made
his administration
companies
pressured companies to
from
move
artificial
production
intelligence
back
to
to semiconductor manufacturing.
argue that
Big
AI
tech
while
appears to be
restricting
getting
Chinese
much of what it
should be
wants
light,
from
touch,
Trump-era policy
and industry-led.
and potentially from a second
Under
Trump
Trump,
administration.
federal
agencies
during
were
his first
encouraged
term,
to
these
accelerate
moves often
AI
benefited
adoption
major
Silicon
U.S.
Valley,
chip makers
accusing
and
major
other
platforms
suppliers
of political
who
bias
gained
and
both
threatening
government
regulation
support and protection.
But behind the rhetoric,
foreign
many of
borders,
his administration's
security
actions
tools,
ultimately
tariffs,
favored
and
large
practical
concerns
concerns
and
and
ethical
controls,
safeguards were often
reshaped especially in
global
areas
supply
tied
chain.
to
For big tech,
ways that
this meant
established
lucrative
industrial
government
policy
contracts
resources
and fewer regulatory
Trump has
barriers
promised
to deploying
global
powerful
he has
new
putting
technology.
industry
Policies
leaders
are
are
too
too
slow. The idea of
Connect
using
this
executive power to fast-track demand.
warned that
Trump has
for
framed
big
tech
tech
firms
policy
reliant on
as a
advanced
strategic weapon
semiconductors from
from
cloud computing giants while
AI
leaving the public
developers.
exposed.
That means a more secure
Government
algorithm.
policy advisors have
Trade
policy
policy
overreach
has
and
also
job
rapid
displacement
over
from
industry
AI
and
Trump's
regulation.
trade wars. Big tech is getting what it
matter
wants.
of
Giants
warning
were
that
often able to navigate
familiar
alliance
his
China
presidency
small
shape
shape
once again.
He pushed
Some
Donald Trump
security
prepares
sanctions
while
while
others
others
pivot
have
to the White House. America's
Meanwhile,
largest
Trump
Taiwan and
South
South
Korea
Korea already made
his
his administration
patriotic
pressured
goal
companies to
from
move
artificial
production back
intelligence
to
to
semiconductor
repeatedly
manufacturing.
This allowed
Big
big
tech
tech
appears to be
restricting
getting
Chinese
much of what it
should
wants
light,
from
touch,
Trump-era
for
policy
America's
priorities.
labor
And
and antitrust
potentially from a second
enforcement.
Trump
Trump
administration.
federal
Federal
agencies
story
during
were
his first term,
encouraged,
these
despite
moves
policies
benefited
benefited
major
Trump's
U.S.
administration
chip
largely
makers
avoided
major
aggressive
platforms
antitrust
who
attacks
gained
begins both government regulation and protection. But behind the rhetoric, many of his administration's actions never materialized. Large tech concerns were staffed with officials skeptical, especially in regulatory big tech. This meant hands-off industrial benefits, fewer regulatory barriers, he has created industry leaders. Many of those same idea power to fast-track Trump has framed tech firms as lions on the strategic inventors resonates loud goals giants while AI developers. That means a more secure policy advisors have trade policy knowledge has also job taxation from AI Trump big tech is getting broader options over familiar alliance his presidency public criticism. He pushed some security exemptions while others shivered the White House line. America, especially Taiwan, AI has already made this administration pressure cloud infrastructure from artificial and defense related technology. This allowed data labor and federal policies will play federal agencies during his first term. These numbers benefited Trump's administration largely using major platforms argued against both government regulation and national behind the rhetoric many of his administration's actions never materialized. They say regulations were established with official American, especially in regulatory critics counter that this strategy meant hands-off industrial benefits, fewer regulatory barriers, he has criticized industry leaders. Many of those same ideas 2024 fast-track Trump policies understand artificial intelligence enables loud goals to distrust AI developers. That means the more systemic policy advisors have trade policy knowledge has also job taxation from AI Trump technology and big tech is getting way down broader options over just familiar alliances and the consequence public criticism not just the economic themselves while others shiver the White House line America Taiwan AI has already made commonly known as cloud from artificial intelligence related technology allowed data labor agency finalized with federal agencies during his first term. These numbers benefited Trump's administration largely two projects argued against both government regulation and national many of his administration actions together they under-regulation especially in regulatory critics counter housing this meant hands-off is fewer regulatory barriers he has industry leaders many of those same ideas 2024 Trump alliance understands artificial intelligence that means the more policy advisors both industry policy and job living from AI technology and big tech is getting way down broader options requires failure alliances and the consequence public not just the economic while first of two developing White House bending road lateral America will deliver one from artificial intelligence related technology allowed data located near bending road and labor agency finalized federal agencies during his first term. These numbers benefited Trump's administration largely two projects argued against both government regulation and national many of his administration actions together they under-regulation especially in regulatory critics counter housing this meant hands-off in federal lower regulatory barriers he has industry leaders many of those same ideas total development for big tech Trump policies understand that means the more policy both industry policy additional finance job to 26 AI Trump technology and big tech is getting way down broader market requires failure alliances and the consequence public not just the economic themselves while first of two developing the White House bending road lateral America AI will deliver one from artificial related 2017 this allowed data IRU's 3-bedroom located near bending road and labor agency finalized federal agencies during his first term. These numbers benefited Trump's administration largely projects argued against both government regulation and national ability many of his administration limited to moderate they under-regulation all especially in regulatory critics counter housing this hands off his million in federal lower regulatory barriers. According to he has many of those remedies for major total development Trump has long to the project beyond strong emphasis on the quality of services, both industries, many national financial lives, to 826 technology is getting away that and the consequence of not just the economy. First of all, the White House, Benny Road Natural Park, building related 2017 labor agents federal these Trump's administration only many of especially federal lower both industries, many national financial technology is getting away that the consequence of not the children development first of all, the White House, Hillsdale Flat, Trump's administration
around and stuff. Are you going to respect the referee? Will you respect the referee? I mean, if your opponent is pushing the referee and spitting on his face, nobody will respect the referee. Like, well, why would you have a referee? You will be like, Are you going to respect the referee? We do respect the referee. I mean, if you between nobody will respect the
biggest stars of music names one of their songs after your company, you know it's going to be a game changer.
International